This system wasn't just about giving him money, it was about teaching him how to use it wisely. He realized that this wasn't just some shortcut to success. It was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to finally take control of his future. The more he explored, the more confident he became. This system had the potential to be his greatest ally, but only if he used it correctly. Taking a deep breath, he locked his phone and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He had spent years struggling, feeling powerless against the world. But now, for the first time, he had something that could help him change his fate. It wasn't going to be easy, but he was ready to take the first step. With a deep breath, he unlocked his phone again and opened the system. His heart pounded in his chest as he scrolled to the task reward section. A notification blinked at the top of the screen. A task. Hesitant but curious, he tapped the button. Instantly, a detailed breakdown appeared, offering him valuable insights, investment tips, smart budgeting techniques, and even a list of potential opportunities based on his current financial state. He skimmed through the suggestions, impressed by the level of detail. It wasn't just random advice, it was practical, tailored specifically to his situation. Determined to test it out, he decided to start small. The system had recommended setting aside a portion of the money for emergency use while gradually investing the rest. Following the advice, he took a small amount of cash and carefully stored it away, feeling a strange sense of security he had never experienced before. For the first time, he wasn't spending money out of desperation, he was making a plan. Encouraged by his first step, he moved on to the next suggestion, analyzing daily expenses. The system provided a tracking feature that categorized his spending habits, highlighting areas where he could cut costs and save efficiently. As he entered the details of his usual spending, rent, food, and basic necessities, he was shocked to see how much he'd been wasting on things he never even needed. Feeling motivated, he decided to take another step forward. He scrolled through the investment suggestions section, where the system listed small, low-risk opportunities he could consider. One option stood out: buying and reselling limited edition items. It wasn't something he had ever thought about before, but with the system's guidance, it seemed worth a try. With careful steps, he used a small portion of the money to purchase a rare collectible item online, something the system predicted would increase in value within weeks. After placing the order, he sat back and exhaled. It was a small risk, but it was the first time he had made a financial decision based on logic instead of impulse. Each small step gave him more confidence. Testing the system's suggestions made him realize that he wasn't just lucky, he was learning. He no longer felt overwhelmed by his circumstances. Instead, he felt in control. However, he knew he had to stay cautious. He couldn't afford to make mistakes. Not when everything was finally starting to turn around. He reminded himself that wealth wasn't built overnight. It required patience and smart decisions. As he stared at his phone, watching the progress bar on his first task completion, he couldn't help but smile. For the first time, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. With the system guiding him, he finally had something he never thought possible: a plan. For so long, his life had been about survival, living day to day without any clear direction. But now, with money in his hands and a tool to help him make the right choices, he could finally think beyond just making ends meet. Sitting in his small apartment, he carefully opened the system and reviewed the wealth he had uncovered so far. It was enough to improve his life, but if he wasn't careful, it could all disappear just as quickly. He knew he had to be smart. Spending recklessly would only bring trouble. The system's financial planning feature offered practical steps to help him manage his money wisely. Following its advice, he decided to divide his wealth into 3 parts: savings, investments, and personal expenses. Savings would act as a safety net, investments would help his money grow, and personal expenses would allow him to improve his daily life without attracting attention. His first goal was simple: find a safer place to live. His current apartment was too run down, too exposed. If anyone found out about his sudden change in fortune, it could put him at risk. The system suggested looking for a modest yet secure apartment in a quieter area, something that wouldn't raise suspicions but would provide a better living environment. Next, he focused on finding smart ways to invest. The system recommended various low-risk options, such as buying small assets that would appreciate over time. He considered investing in second-hand electronics, rental equipment, or even small shares in businesses that didn't require too much attention. Each decision had to be calculated and discreet. Drawing attention to himself was the last thing he wanted. For personal expenses, he chose to keep things simple. He replaced his worn-out clothes with decent but affordable ones, making sure not to overdo it. He allowed himself small luxuries, like better meals and occasional outings, but nothing that would make others question where his money was coming from. Despite his careful planning, doubt still lingered in his mind. What if he was making the wrong choices? What if something went wrong? But every time those thoughts crept in, he reminded himself that he had never come this far before. This wasn't just luck, it was an opportunity to build something real, and he couldn't afford to waste it. As he finalized his plans, he realized something important. Having money was one thing, but knowing how to use it wisely was the real challenge. He needed to stay focused, patient, and disciplined. Success wouldn't happen overnight, but with every step he was getting closer to the life he had always dreamed of. Looking at his phone, he reviewed his plan one last time. Everything was set. With determination in his heart, he was ready to take control of his future, one careful step at a time. Despite his efforts to move forward, the past had a way of showing up when he least expected it. No matter how much progress he made, he couldn't escape the people who once looked down on him. Their words, their laughter, and their judgment still echoed in his mind. But now things were different. He was different. Talking through the familiar streets, he couldn't help but notice the same faces that used to mock him. The classmates who once sneered at his old clothes, the neighbors who whispered about his failures, and the co-workers who never took him seriously. They were all still there, living their lives as if nothing had changed. But he had changed, and he was no longer the weak, helpless boy they remembered. He passed by a group of his former classmates gathered outside a cafe. The moment they saw him, their expressions shifted. Some smirked, others whispered, and one of them, the loudest of the group, called out to him. "Still struggling to make ends meet?" he said with a mocking grin. The others laughed, expecting him to lower his head and walk away like he always did. But this time, he didn't. He stood there, meeting their gazes with calm confidence. Instead of reacting with anger or frustration, he simply smiled and replied, "I'm doing just fine." His voice was steady, his posture composed, a version of himself they had never seen before. Fear, laughter faded, replaced by confusion. They had expected him to be the same timid person they could easily push around. But something about him felt different. He wasn't flaunting his success or trying to prove anything, yet there was an unmistakable sense of quiet strength in the way he carried himself. As he walked away, he could still hear their whispers behind him, but this time they didn't sting. He no longer cared about their opinions because he knew something they didn't. His life was finally changing, and their words no longer had power over him.